Sarah Martinez had been working the night shift at Mercy General Hospital for 8 years, but she had never faced a morning quite like this one. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she made her final rounds, checking on patients before the day staff arrived. Her white sneakers squeaked softly against the polished linoleum floor as she walked toward room 314, where Harold Thompson lay sleeping. Harold was 92 years old, a Korean War veteran who had been admitted 3 days earlier with pneumonia. His weathered hands rested on the thin hospital blanket, and Sarah noticed the faded tattoo on his forearm that read Semper Fi, a reminder of his service with the Marines decades ago. His breathing was labored, and the oxygen monitor beside his bed showed readings that concerned her. As Sarah approached his bedside, Harold's eyes fluttered open. His voice was barely a whisper as he spoke. "Nurse, I'm not feeling too good. Could you stay with me for a minute?" The vulnerability in his voice tugged at her heart. She had seen that same look countless times, the fear that comes when someone realizes they might not have much time left. Sarah pulled up a chair beside his bed, even though hospital policy strictly forbade nurses from spending extended time with individual patients unless performing specific medical procedures. She knew her supervisor, Mrs. Henderson, would disapprove, but something about Harold's condition told her this was more important than following rules to the letter. "Tell me about your family, Harold," Sarah said softly, taking his hand in hers. His skin was paper-thin and cold, but his grip was surprisingly firm. Harold's eyes brightened slightly as he began to speak about his late wife, Margaret, who had passed away 5 years earlier. He told Sarah about their 3 children, now scattered across the country, and how Margaret used to make the best apple pie in their neighborhood. As he spoke, his breathing seemed to ease, and the tension lines around his eyes softened. "She waited for me when I came back from Korea," Harold continued, his voice growing stronger with each memory. "I was damaged, you know. The war did things to a man's mind back then that nobody talked about. But, Margaret, she saw past all that. She helped me become whole again." Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking gentle questions that kept Harold talking. She noticed his vital signs stabilizing on the monitors, and his color seemed to improve as he shared his stories. The human connection was providing comfort that no medication could offer. As the morning light began filtering through the window, Harold's daughter called. Sarah held the phone to his ear, and she watched tears stream down his face as he spoke with his child for what might be the last time. After the call ended, Harold squeezed Sarah's hand. "Thank you for letting me remember," he said. "Sometimes an old soldier just needs someone to listen to his stories." Sarah was about to respond when she heard the sharp click of heels approaching down the hallway. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway, her expression stern and disapproving. She was a woman in her 50s who ran the nursing staff with military precision, always carrying a clipboard and checking her watch as if every second was accounted for in some grand schedule. "Nurse Martinez, what exactly are you doing?" "Mrs. Henderson's voice carried the authority of someone who had never broken a rule in her life. "You've been in this room for over 30 minutes. We have protocols for a reason." Sarah stood slowly, her heart racing. She knew this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for how it would feel. "Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Thompson was having difficulty breathing, and you were socializing with a patient when you should have been completing your rounds and preparing your shift report," Mrs. Henderson interrupted. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that leads to inefficiency and complications. We've discussed this before." It was true that Sarah had received warnings in the past for spending too much time with patients. She had a reputation for going beyond her basic duties, often staying late to comfort worried families or sitting with patients who had no visitors. Her colleagues admired her compassion, but administration viewed it as a liability. "Mr. Thompson is a veteran, and he was frightened," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Sometimes patients need more than just medical care. They need human connection." Mrs. Henderson's expression didn't soften. "Nurse Martinez, your job is to administer medications, monitor vital signs, and follow care plans. It is not to provide counseling or emotional support beyond basic professional courtesy. You've been warned about this behavior multiple times." Harold attempted to speak from his bed. "Please, ma'am," she was just, "Sir, please rest," Mrs. Henderson said dismissively. This doesn't concern you. But it did concern Harold, and it concerned every patient who had ever felt scared and alone in a hospital bed. Sarah realized that this moment represented something much larger than a policy violation. It was about what kind of care they believed patients deserved. Mrs. Henderson, I understand the importance of efficiency, but there are no buts in healthcare, Nurse Martinez. Either you follow protocols, or you find another place to work. This hospital cannot afford to have staff members who think rules don't apply to them. The words hung in the air like a threat. Sarah looked back at Harold, who was watching the exchange with growing distress. His breathing had become labored again, and the monitors showed his heart rate increasing. You're upsetting the patient, Sarah pointed out. I'm addressing a personnel issue that should have been resolved long ago, Mrs. Henderson replied curtly. You have a choice to make, Nurse Martinez. You can commit to following protocols exactly as written, or you can clear out your locker today. Sarah felt the weight of 8 years of service pressing down on her. She thought about all the patients she had comforted, all the families she had supported during their darkest hours, and all the times her compassion had made a real difference in someone's life. She also thought about her student loans, her rent, and the fact that finding another nursing position would be difficult with a disciplinary action on her record. But, as she looked at Harold's frightened face, she realized that some things mattered more than job security. Mrs. Henderson, if caring too much about patients is my biggest fault, then I accept whatever consequences come from that. Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. I became a nurse to help people, not to simply follow a checklist. Mrs. Henderson's expression hardened. Very well. You're suspended immediately pending a full review. Please collect your personal items and leave the premises. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. 8 years of dedicated service, countless overtime hours, and genuine care for patients, all erased because she had held an old veteran's hand and listened to his stories. As Mrs. Henderson left the room, Harold reached out weakly toward Sarah. I'm so sorry, dear. This is all my fault. No, Harold, Sarah said, taking his hand one last time. This isn't your fault. Sometimes doing the right thing comes with a price, but that doesn't make it wrong. She gathered her few personal items from the nurse's station while her colleagues watched in stunned silence. Several of them approached her with words of support, but they spoke in whispers, afraid of facing similar consequences. This is wrong, Sarah, whispered Janet, a nurse who had worked alongside her for 3 years. You're the best nurse on this floor. The patients love you, added Mark, a newer nurse who had looked up to Sarah as a mentor. This place won't be the same without you. Their support meant everything, but it couldn't change what had happened. Sarah walked toward the elevator, her nursing bag in hand and her heart heavy with the injustice of it all. As the elevator doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of the hallway where she had spent so many years caring for patients who needed more than just medical treatment. She had always believed that healing involved not just the body, but the spirit as well. Now, as she descended toward the hospital lobby, Sarah wondered if there was still a place in modern healthcare for nurses who believed in the power of human compassion. The elevator seemed to be taking forever, and each floor that passed marked the end of a career she had loved despite its challenges. The lobby was busy with visitors, staff members beginning their day shifts, and patients being discharged. Sarah walked through the automatic doors and into the crisp morning air, unemployed for the first time in nearly a decade. She sat in her car for several minutes, processing what had just happened. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mother. Hope you're having a good day at work, sweetheart. The irony wasn't lost on her. As she drove home through the quiet residential streets, Sarah reflected on Harold's stories about Margaret and their life together. Despite everything that had happened, she didn't regret spending that time with him. Some moments in life are more important than policies and procedures. But, as reality set in, Sarah began to worry about her future. Would other hospitals want to hire a nurse who had been suspended for policy violations? How would she explain what happened in job interviews? The healthcare industry was small, and word traveled fast. By the time she reached her apartment, Sarah felt the full weight of her decision. She had stood up for what she believed was right, but the cost was higher than she had anticipated. As she unlocked her door, she wondered if compassion and efficiency could ever truly coexist in modern healthcare. Within hours of Sarah's suspension, word began to spread throughout Mercy General Hospital like wildfire. The nursing staff was in shock, and many of the patients who had been under Sarah's care were asking where she had gone. Harold Thompson, despite his weakened condition, had managed to tell several visitors about what had happened, and the story was beginning to reach beyond the hospital walls. Dr. Michael Roberts had been Harold's attending physician for the past 3 days, and, when he arrived for his morning rounds, he immediately noticed the change in his patient's condition. Harold's breathing was more labored, his color had worsened, and the monitors showed elevated stress indicators that hadn't been present earlier. "Mr. Thompson, how are you feeling today?" Dr. Roberts asked, checking the chart at the foot of the bed. "Doctor, they fired the only nurse who treated me like a human being," Harold said with whatever strength he could muster. "That young woman sat with me when I was scared, listened to my stories, and made me feel like I mattered. Now she's gone because she cared too much." Dr. Roberts frowned as he processed this information. He had worked with Sarah Martinez for several years and had always been impressed by her dedication and the positive outcomes her patients experienced. Her approach to nursing was exactly what he hoped to see more of in healthcare. "What exactly happened, Mr. Thompson?" Harold recounted the morning's events, describing how Sarah had comforted him, helped him speak with his daughter, and provided the kind of care that went beyond medical procedures. He explained how Mrs. Henderson had arrived and criticized Sarah for spending time with a patient. "She stood up for what she believed was right, doctor. Even when that supervisor threatened her job, she wouldn't abandon what she knew was the proper way to treat people." Dr. Roberts felt a growing sense of frustration. He had seen too many good healthcare providers leave the profession because bureaucratic policies increasingly prioritized efficiency over patient care. Sarah Martinez represented everything that was right about nursing, and her suspension seemed to represent everything that was wrong with hospital administration. After completing his rounds, Dr. Roberts sought out Mrs. Henderson to discuss the situation. He found her in the administrative offices, reviewing staffing schedules with the same mechanical precision she applied to everything else. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to speak with you about Nurse Martinez, Dr." Roberts said, closing the office door behind him. "The matter has been resolved, Dr. Roberts. Nurse Martinez failed to follow protocols and has been suspended pending review. She was providing excellent patient care to Mr. Thompson, who specifically requested her presence. His condition has deteriorated since she left, and I believe her compassionate approach was actually beneficial to his recovery." Mrs. Henderson looked up from her paperwork with an expression of annoyance. "Dr. Roberts, nurses cannot be permitted to spend 30 minutes socializing with each patient. We have efficiency standards and productivity requirements that must be met." "But what about patient satisfaction and outcome improvements?" "Nurse Martinez consistently receives the highest ratings from patients and families. Her approach may take more time initially, but it often results in better overall outcomes." "That may be, but rules exist for a reason. If we allow one nurse to disregard protocols, it creates chaos and undermines the entire system." Dr. Roberts realized that Mrs. Henderson was unwilling to consider alternative perspectives on patient care. Her worldview was built around regulations and procedures, with little room for the human elements that made healthcare truly effective. Meanwhile, word of Sarah's suspension was spreading beyond the hospital. Harold's daughter, Jennifer, lived in California but had been planning to visit her father later in the week. When Harold called to tell her what had happened, she was outraged. "Dad, you're telling me they fired a nurse for being kind to you?" "She wasn't fired yet, but they suspended her. Jennifer, this woman made me feel human again. She listened to my stories about your mother, helped me talk to you on the phone, and treated me with dignity. I haven't felt that respected in a hospital setting in years." Jennifer had always been protective of her father, especially since her mother had passed away. She knew how lonely and frightened Harold could become in medical settings, and the idea that someone had finally provided him with genuine care only to be punished for it made her furious. "Dad, I'm going to make some calls. This isn't right." Jennifer worked as a journalist for a regional newspaper in San Diego, and she understood the power of public attention in addressing institutional problems. She began researching Sarah Martinez and Mercy General Hospital, looking for patterns of behavior that might indicate broader issues with patient care policies. What she discovered disturbed her. Over the past 2 years, Mercy General had lost several experienced nurses who had been known for their compassionate approach to patient care. Exit interviews, which Jennifer obtained through public records requests, revealed a pattern of conflicts between nursing staff and administration over time spent with patients. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Sarah's absence was being felt throughout the facility. Patients who had been under her care were asking about her whereabouts, and several family members were expressing concern about the change in care quality. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman recovering from hip surgery, had developed a close relationship with Sarah over the past week. When the new nurse assigned to her case approached with medications, Mrs. Patterson asked, "Where is Nurse Sarah?" She always explains what the medications are for and asks how I'm feeling. The replacement nurse, who was competent but overworked, simply said, "She's no longer on this floor," and moved on to the next patient without the personal attention Sarah would have provided. Similar scenes were playing out throughout the hospital. Sarah's approach to nursing had created connections with patients that went beyond basic medical care, and her absence left a noticeable void in the quality of patient experience. By afternoon, 3 different patients had requested to speak with hospital administration about Sarah's absence. 2 family members had called the hospital's patient advocacy department asking why their loved one's primary nurse had suddenly disappeared without explanation. Dr. Roberts found himself fielding multiple questions from patients and families about Sarah's whereabouts. Each conversation reinforced his belief that her suspension was not only unjust but actively harmful to patient care. At her apartment, Sarah spent the day alternating between moments of doubt and periods of resolve. She had never been unemployed since becoming a nurse, and the uncertainty was overwhelming. Her savings account could cover her expenses for perhaps 2 months, but the job market for nurses with disciplinary actions was challenging. She received several text messages from colleagues expressing support and sharing updates about the situation at the hospital. Janet texted, "Patients are asking about you constantly." Mrs. Patterson actually cried when I told her you weren't coming back to her case. Mark sent, "Dr. Roberts is really upset about this. He's been asking administration questions all day." The messages provided some comfort, but they also highlighted the disruption her suspension was causing for the patients she had been caring for. Sarah began to worry that her stand on principle might be hurting the very people she had been trying to help. As evening approached, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from Jennifer Thompson, Harold's daughter. "Nurse Martinez, this is Jennifer Thompson. You probably don't remember me, but you helped my father speak with me on the phone this morning." "Of course I remember. How is your father doing?" "He's not doing well, and I don't think it's just his pneumonia. He told me what happened with your supervisor, and I want you to know that what you did for him this morning meant everything. My father hasn't felt that cared for since my mother died." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I just did what felt right. Your father is a remarkable man with incredible stories." "That's exactly what I'm calling about. I'm a journalist, and I think people need to hear about what happened today. Would you be willing to talk with me about your experience at Mercy General?" Sarah hesitated. Speaking with a journalist could make her situation more difficult, but it might also shed light on broader problems in healthcare that needed addressing. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. I don't want to cause more trouble." "Nurse Martinez, trouble has already been caused, but not by you. My father is one of thousands of patients who need compassionate care, and nurses like you are being punished for providing it. That's a story that needs to be told." Sarah agreed to meet with Jennifer the following day. As she hung up the phone, she realized that her individual stand might be part of something larger, a growing tension between the business of healthcare and the human side of healing. That evening, Harold Thompson's condition continued to decline. His breathing became more labored, and the nursing staff called Dr. Roberts for an emergency consultation. As Dr. Roberts examined Harold, he couldn't help but notice how different the patient seemed from the morning when Sarah had been providing care. "Mr. Thompson, is there anything that would help you feel more comfortable?" Harold's voice was weak, but his message was clear. "I want Nurse Sarah to come back. She made me feel like I mattered." Dr. Roberts knew that hospital policy prevented suspended employees from returning to patient care, but Harold's request highlighted the profound impact that compassionate nursing could have on patient outcomes. As the night shift began, the new nurses assigned to Harold's care did their jobs competently, but the personal connection that Sarah had established was missing. Harold lay in his bed, breathing with difficulty, wondering why the one person who had treated him with genuine respect had been taken away. The hospital hallways seemed different that evening. The efficiency that Mrs. Henderson prized so highly was present, but something essential was missing. Patients were receiving medical care, but the human element that transformed treatment into healing was notably absent. Sarah's suspension had created ripples that extended far beyond one policy violation. It had exposed fundamental questions about what patients deserve from their healthcare providers and whether compassion could coexist with institutional efficiency. As Harold drifted off to sleep that night, he thought about Margaret and the kindness she had always shown to others. He wondered if people like Sarah Martinez were becoming extinct in a world that valued speed over substance, efficiency over empathy. Little did anyone know that the events set in motion by Sarah's morning of compassion were about to reach someone who had the power to change everything. Harold's story was spreading beyond the hospital, beyond the local community, and into circles where decisions about healthcare policy and military veteran care were made. The quiet dignity of one elderly veteran and the professional courage of one dedicated nurse were about to intersect with forces much larger than either of them had imagined. At exactly 11:47 a.m. the following morning, 12 minutes after Sarah Martinez had finished clearing out her locker and walked through the hospital's front doors for what she believed might be the last time, a black sedan with government plates pulled into the emergency vehicle area at Mercy General Hospital. The driver, a young military aide in dress blues, quickly opened the rear door, and out stepped General Patricia Williams, a four-star general who served as the Deputy Commanding General of the Army Medical Command. At 58, General Williams was a decorated veteran who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, overseeing medical operations that saved countless lives. General Williams was in town for a routine inspection of military healthcare partnerships with civilian hospitals, but this visit had become anything but routine. The previous evening, she had received a phone call that changed her entire agenda. The call had come from Congressman David Mitchell, whose staff had been contacted by Jennifer Thompson about her father's situation. Jennifer's story about a nurse being suspended for providing compassionate care to a Korean War veteran had traveled quickly through military advocacy networks, eventually reaching the congressman's office. "General Williams, I think you need to hear about something that happened at Mercy General Hospital," Congressman Mitchell had said during their conversation. "We have a situation involving the treatment of one of our veterans that requires immediate attention." As General Williams heard the details of Harold Thompson's story and Sarah Martinez's suspension, her expression had grown increasingly serious. She had spent her entire career fighting to ensure that veterans received the care and respect they deserved, and what she was hearing represented exactly the kind of institutional failure she had dedicated her life to preventing. "Congressman Mitchell, I'll be at that hospital first thing in the morning," she had said. "If what you're telling me is accurate, we have a serious problem that needs immediate correction." Now, as General Williams walked through the automatic doors of Mercy General Hospital, her presence commanded immediate attention. The 4 stars on her uniform shoulders caught the light, and the ribbons on her chest told the story of a distinguished military career dedicated to medical service and veteran care. The receptionist at the front desk looked up with surprise. "General, how may we help you?" "I need to speak with your hospital administrator immediately, and I need to visit with a patient named Harold Thompson. This is not a scheduled visit, and it is extremely urgent." Within minutes, the hospital's administrative staff was in chaos. Mrs. Henderson received an urgent call summoning her to the main administrative office, where she found herself face-to-face with a 4-star general whose expression suggested this was not a social call. Hospital Administrator Robert Kane, a man in his early 60s who had managed Mercy General for over a decade, hurried to meet General Williams in his office. He had no idea why such a high-ranking military officer was at his hospital, but he understood that this was a situation requiring his immediate attention. General Williams, what brings you to Mercy General today? Mr. Kane, I'm here about Harold Thompson, a Korean War veteran who is currently a patient in your facility, and about a nurse named Sarah Martinez who was suspended yesterday for providing compassionate care to Mr. Thompson. The administrator's face went pale. He had been briefed about the Martinez suspension but had supported Mrs. Henderson's decision based on policy compliance concerns. The presence of a four-star general suggested this situation was far more significant than he had realized. Sir, I'm not sure I understand the connection between Mr. Kane. Let me be very clear, General Williams interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Harold Thompson served his country with honor and distinction during the Korean War. He earned the right to be treated with dignity and respect, particularly in his medical care. From what I understand, Nurse Martinez provided exactly that kind of care and was punished for it. General Williams had reviewed Harold's military records during the drive to the hospital. Harold had served with the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, and had been wounded during the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge. He had received the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star for his service, and he represented exactly the kind of veteran General Williams had sworn to protect. General, we have protocols and efficiency standards that must be maintained, the administrator said, attempting to defend the hospital's position. Mr. Kane, I have protocols too. One of them is ensuring that veterans receive compassionate, dignified care in any facility that receives military healthcare contracts or serves veteran patients. Another is holding accountable any institution that fails to meet those standards. The weight of her words was unmistakable. Mercy General Hospital held several contracts with the military healthcare system and served as an overflow facility for veteran patients. General Williams had the authority to review and potentially terminate those agreements. I want to see Mr. Thompson immediately, and I want Mrs. Henderson present for that visit. After that, I want to meet with Nurse Martinez. General, Nurse Martinez is no longer employed here. She was suspended yesterday. I'm aware of that, Mr. Kane. Call her and get her here immediately. This situation is going to be resolved today, one way or another. As the administrator scrambled to arrange the requested meetings, General Williams took a moment to review the broader implications of what she had learned. The treatment of Harold Thompson and the suspension of Sarah Martinez represented symptoms of a larger problem in healthcare, the gradual erosion of compassionate care in favor of pure efficiency. Throughout her military career, General Williams had seen the healing power of human connection in medical settings. She had witnessed nurses and doctors who went beyond their basic duties to provide comfort and dignity to wounded soldiers, and she had observed the dramatic difference such care made in recovery outcomes. 20 minutes later, General Williams walked into Harold Thompson's room, followed by Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Kane, and Dr. Roberts, who had been asked to join the group. Harold was awake but looked frail and tired. His condition had continued to decline since Sarah's departure. Mr. Thompson, I'm General Patricia Williams. I'm here because I understand you're a fellow veteran who has not been receiving the respect you deserve. Harold's eyes widened with surprise and, then, filled with tears. In his 92 years, he had never been visited by such a high-ranking military officer, and her presence in his hospital room felt both surreal and deeply meaningful. General, ma'am, I don't understand why you're here. I'm here because your story reached people who care about how veterans are treated, and because what happened to the nurse who cared for you represents something that cannot be tolerated. General Williams pulled a chair close to Harold's bed, much as Sarah had done the previous morning. Harold, tell me about your service in Korea. For the next 15 minutes, General Williams listened as Harold shared stories about his time with the Marines, his injuries at Heartbreak Ridge, and the challenges he faced returning home. She asked detailed questions about his unit, his commanders, and his experiences, demonstrating a level of knowledge and interest that made Harold feel truly heard. Mrs. Henderson stood awkwardly to the side, beginning to understand that her decision to suspend Sarah Martinez had implications she had never considered. This was no longer about hospital protocols or efficiency standards, it was about respect for a veteran who had served his country with honor. Harold, yesterday morning a nurse named Sarah Martinez spent time with you, listened to your stories, and provided you with comfort during a difficult time.
Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. She made me feel human again.
She treated me like my stories mattered, like I mattered. General Williams turned to Mrs. Henderson.
And, you suspended this nurse for providing exactly the kind of care that this veteran deserved?
General, we have protocols that prevent nurses from spending excessive time with individual patients.
It affects efficiency and productivity. Mrs. Henderson, let me share something with you.
In my 35 years of military service, I have learned that efficiency without compassion is not healthcare, it's processing. This veteran earned the right to be treated as more than a number on a chart.
The room fell silent as the implications of General Williams' words settled over everyone present.
Harold watched with growing amazement as this distinguished military officer defended the nurse who had shown him kindness. General, Harold said softly, Nurse Sarah lost her job because she treated me right.
That's not fair. Harold, you're absolutely correct. It's not fair, and it's not acceptable. General Williams stood and addressed the hospital administrators.
I want Sarah Martinez reinstated immediately, with full pay for the time she was suspended, and I want an apology from this institution.
Mr. Kane looked uncomfortable.
General, we have personnel policies and procedures that, Mr. Kane, you also have contracts with the military healthcare system that require you to provide appropriate care to veteran patients. I am prepared to recommend immediate review of those contracts if this situation is not resolved to my satisfaction within the next hour.
The financial implications were significant.
Military healthcare contracts represented millions of dollars in annual revenue for Mercy General Hospital, and losing those agreements would be catastrophic for the institution's budget. Additionally, General Williams continued, I want a full review of your policies regarding patient care time and nurse-patient interaction. If your protocols prevent compassionate care, then your protocols need to change.
Mrs. Henderson attempted one final defense of her position. General, if we allow nurses to spend unlimited time with patients, we cannot maintain adequate staffing coverage throughout the facility.
Mrs. Henderson, I'm not asking for unlimited time. I'm asking for reasonable flexibility that allows healthcare providers to respond to patient needs with compassion and dignity.
That should be the minimum standard, not a policy violation.
Dr. Roberts, who had remained quiet during most of the conversation, finally spoke. General Williams, if I may, Nurse Martinez consistently achieves better patient outcomes than our department average. Her approach may take more time initially, but it often results in shorter overall stays and higher patient satisfaction ratings.
Thank you, Doctor. That's exactly what I would expect. Compassionate care isn't just morally right, it's medically effective.
General Williams returned her attention to Harold. Harold, I want you to know that your service to this country matters, your stories matter, and you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity in every healthcare setting.
Thank you, ma'am. That means more than you know.
As they prepared to leave Harold's room, General Williams made one final point to the assembled administrators. Gentlemen, Mrs. Henderson, this veteran and thousands like him earned the right to compassionate care through their service to our nation. Any healthcare facility that fails to provide such care will answer to me personally.
The group left Harold's room with a clear understanding that significant changes were about to occur at Mercy General Hospital.
General Williams had spoken with the authority of someone who had the power to enforce her expectations, and the stakes were too high for the hospital to ignore her demands. As they walked toward the administrative offices, Mr. Kane was already planning the phone call that would bring Sarah Martinez back to work. Mrs. Henderson was beginning to realize that her rigid interpretation of hospital protocols had created a crisis that threatened the institution's future. But, most importantly, Harold Thompson lay in his hospital bed with renewed hope, knowing that someone with real authority had heard his story and understood the importance of treating veterans with the dignity they deserved. The 12 minutes between Sarah's departure and General Williams' arrival had changed everything, setting in motion events that would transform not just one nurse's career, but the entire culture of patient care at Mercy General Hospital. Sarah Martinez was sitting in her apartment, still in her pajamas at noon, staring at job search websites on her laptop when her phone rang. The number displayed was from Mercy General Hospital, and her first instinct was to let it go to voicemail.
She couldn't imagine what the hospital administration would want to discuss after yesterday's events.
But something made her answer.
Hello? Ms. Martinez, this is Robert Kane, the hospital administrator at Mercy General. I need you to come in immediately.
There's been a significant development in your situation. Sarah felt her heart racing.
Mr. Kane, I was suspended yesterday.
I'm not sure why you would need Ms. Martinez. Please listen carefully. A 4-star general from the Army Medical Command is here at the hospital specifically because of what happened with you and Mr. Thompson. She has requested to meet with you immediately, and she has made certain demands regarding your employment status.
The words didn't make sense at first. Sarah sat in stunned silence, trying to process what she was hearing. I'm sorry, what did you say? A general?
General Patricia Williams is here because the story of your suspension reached military leadership through Mr. Thompson's family. She has reviewed your case and Mr. Thompson's treatment, and she has made it clear that your suspension must be reversed immediately. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to understand how her situation with Harold Thompson could have reached such a high level of military leadership. The idea that a 4-star general was at the hospital because of her seemed impossible to believe.
Mr. Kane, I don't understand.
How did Ms. Martinez? I don't have time to explain everything over the phone. You need to get here as quickly as possible. General Williams is waiting to meet with you, and there are significant changes about to occur at this hospital.
Sarah quickly dressed and drove to the hospital in a daze.
Just 24 hours earlier, she had been suspended for providing compassionate care to a veteran patient. Now she was being summoned back because of military intervention at the highest levels. When she arrived at the hospital, Sarah was immediately escorted to the main administrative conference room. As she walked through the hallways, she noticed her colleagues staring at her with expressions of amazement and curiosity. Word had spread throughout the hospital about the general's presence and her connection to Sarah's suspension. The conference room door opened, and Sarah found herself facing a distinguished woman in military uniform whose chest displayed ribbons and decorations representing decades of service. General Williams stood as Sarah entered, extending her hand with a warm smile.
Nurse Martinez, I'm General Patricia Williams. Thank you for coming in so quickly.
Sarah shook the general's hand, still struggling to process the surreal nature of the situation. General Williams, I have to admit I'm confused about why you're here. I'm here because Harold Thompson is a Korean War veteran who deserves compassionate, dignified care, and because you provided exactly that kind of care before being punished for it. That's unacceptable, and it's going to change.
Also present in the room were Mr. Kane, Mrs. Henderson, Dr. Roberts, and a military aide who was taking notes.
Mrs. Henderson looked uncomfortable and avoided making eye contact with Sarah, while Dr. Roberts offered an encouraging smile. Nurse Martinez, General Williams continued, I've reviewed your employment record, spoken with Dr. Roberts about your patient care outcomes, and, most importantly, I've spent time with Harold Thompson. What I've learned is that you represent exactly the kind of healthcare provider that veterans need and deserve. Sarah felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. After 24 hours of questioning her career choices and worrying about her future, hearing these words of validation from such a distinguished military leader was overwhelming. General Williams, I just did what felt right. Mr. Thompson was scared and alone, and I couldn't walk away from that. That's precisely why you're the kind of nurse who should be celebrated, not suspended. General Williams turned to address the hospital administrators.
Mr. Kane, Mrs. Henderson, I want Nurse Martinez reinstated immediately with full pay for the time she was suspended.
I also want a formal apology from this institution.
Mr. Kane nodded quickly. Of course, General.
Nurse Martinez, please consider yourself reinstated effective immediately. You'll receive full pay for yesterday, and we sincerely apologize for any distress this situation has caused. Mrs. Henderson finally spoke, her voice noticeably subdued compared to her authoritative tone of the previous day. Nurse Martinez, I want to apologize personally for my handling of this situation. I failed to consider the full context of your actions and the importance of compassionate care for our veteran patients.
Sarah was struck by the dramatic change in Mrs. Henderson's demeanor.
The woman who had been so rigid and uncompromising just 24 hours earlier now seemed to understand that her interpretation of hospital protocols had been fundamentally flawed. Furthermore, General Williams continued, I want to see immediate changes to your patient care policies. Nurses must have the flexibility to respond to patient needs with appropriate compassion and attention. Efficiency is important, but it cannot come at the expense of human dignity. Dr. Roberts spoke up for the first time. General Williams, if I may, I think this situation highlights the need for a broader conversation about patient care standards. Nurse Martinez's approach consistently produces better outcomes, and we should be encouraging more nurses to follow her example.
Exactly, Doctor.
What happened here yesterday wasn't an isolated policy violation, it was a symptom of a healthcare system that has lost sight of its fundamental mission to heal not just bodies, but spirits as well.
General Williams turned back to Sarah.
Nurse Martinez, I want you to know that Harold Thompson specifically requested that I ensure you could continue caring for him. He credits you with making him feel human again during a very frightening time.
How is he doing today? Sarah asked, her concern for Harold evident in her voice.
His condition has been declining since yesterday, and I believe part of that decline is related to the stress of losing the one healthcare provider who had established a genuine connection with him. Sarah felt a pang of guilt, wondering if her suspension had contributed to Harold's deteriorating health.
I'd like to check on him as soon as possible. I think that's an excellent idea, General Williams said. In fact, I'd like to observe how you interact with him.
Your approach to patient care is exactly what we need more of in healthcare facilities that serve veterans. The group moved from the conference room toward Harold's hospital room.
As they walked through the hallways, Sarah noticed that staff members were watching with fascination.
News of the general's presence and the reversal of Sarah's suspension had spread throughout the hospital. When they entered Harold's room, his face immediately brightened upon seeing Sarah.
Nurse Sarah. They told me you might come back. Hello, Harold. I'm so sorry about yesterday. How are you feeling?
Harold reached out to take her hand, his grip weak but determined.
I'm better now that you're here.
This general lady came to see me earlier and made sure everyone knew that you were a good nurse who deserved respect.
Sarah looked back at General Williams with gratitude. Thank you for understanding what really happened.
Harold, tell Nurse Martinez about our conversation this morning, General Williams encouraged.
Nurse Sarah, this general listened to my stories just like you did.
She asked about my time in Korea and treated me like my service mattered. She made me understand that what you did for me yesterday wasn't wrong, it was exactly right. Sarah spent the next 20 minutes with Harold, checking his vital signs, adjusting his medications, and listening as he shared more stories about his life with Margaret. General Williams observed closely, noting how Harold's stress levels decreased and his overall demeanor improved with Sarah's attentive care. Dr. Roberts also watched carefully, documenting the measurable changes in Harold's condition as he received the kind of personalized attention that Sarah provided. The patient's breathing became less labored, his heart rate stabilized, and his color improved noticeably.
This is remarkable, Dr. Roberts whispered to General Williams.
You can actually see the therapeutic effect of compassionate care in his vital signs. After leaving Harold's room, General Williams addressed the assembled group one final time.
What I've witnessed here today confirms everything I believed about the importance of treating veterans with dignity and respect. Mr. Kane, Mrs.
Henderson, I want you to use this situation as a catalyst for broader changes in how your staff approaches patient care.
General Williams, what specific changes would you recommend? Mr. Kane asked.
First, revise your protocols to allow healthcare providers appropriate flexibility in responding to patient needs. Second, provide training to your administrative staff on the importance of veteran care and the unique needs of military patients. Third, establish clear policies that protect healthcare providers who go above and beyond basic requirements to provide compassionate care. General Williams paused before delivering her final point. And, most importantly, recognize that efficiency and compassion are not mutually exclusive. The best healthcare facilities find ways to achieve both.
Mrs. Henderson nodded earnestly. General, we will implement all of these recommendations immediately.
This situation has taught us that our policies needed significant revision. As the formal meetings concluded, General Williams asked to speak privately with Sarah. They walked to a quiet corner of the hospital lobby, away from the administrative staff.
Nurse Martinez, I want you to understand something important.
What you did for Harold Thompson represents the highest ideals of healthcare service. You put his needs above your job security, and that kind of moral courage is rare and valuable.
General Williams, I still can't believe this is happening. Yesterday I thought my nursing career might be over.
Your career isn't over, it's about to reach a new level. I'm going to be recommending you for a civilian commendation from the Army Medical Command for your exemplary care of a veteran patient.
Your actions deserve recognition, not punishment. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the dramatic reversal of her circumstances. I don't know how to thank you.
Thank me by continuing to provide the kind of care that makes patients feel human.
Healthcare needs more people like you, not fewer.
As General Williams prepared to leave the hospital, she made one final stop to visit Harold Thompson. She wanted to ensure he understood that his story had made a difference.
Harold, I'm leaving now,
but I want you to know that what happened here will prevent other veterans from experiencing what you went through. Your willingness to speak up about Nurse Martinez's care has created changes that will benefit many people.
General, ma'am, I never thought my story would matter to anyone important.
Harold, every veteran's story matters, and every veteran deserves to be treated with the same respect and dignity that you received from Nurse Martinez.
That's a promise I intend to keep. 3 months later, Harold Thompson was released from the hospital after making a full recovery.
His family credited Sarah's compassionate care as a crucial factor in his healing process. He continued to visit Sarah at the hospital occasionally, always bringing stories and always finding a nurse who had time to listen. Mrs. Henderson implemented sweeping changes to the hospital's patient care policies, creating flexibility for healthcare providers to respond to patient needs with appropriate attention and compassion. She also enrolled in additional training programs to better understand the connection between emotional support and medical outcomes. Sarah Martinez received the civilian commendation from the Army Medical Command and was promoted to senior nurse status with expanded responsibilities for training other staff in compassionate care techniques. She became a mentor for new nurses, teaching them that efficiency and empathy could coexist in modern healthcare. Dr. Roberts used the data from Harold's case to publish a research paper on the measurable benefits of compassionate nursing care, contributing to a growing body of evidence supporting patient-centered approaches to healthcare. Most importantly, the story of Harold Thompson and Sarah Martinez became a catalyst for broader conversations about healthcare priorities, veteran care, and the essential role of human connection in the healing process. What had begun as a simple act of compassion between a nurse and a frightened patient had evolved into institutional changes that would benefit countless future patients. General Williams kept in touch with both Harold and Sarah, occasionally visiting the hospital to ensure that the changes she had demanded were being sustained. She often reflected on how 12 minutes, the brief window between Sarah's departure and her own arrival, had created an opportunity to address systemic problems in healthcare that had existed for far too long. The lesson was clear: sometimes standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything, creates the conditions for justice to prevail. And, sometimes, justice arrives exactly when it's needed most, carried by those who have the power and the will to make things right.